Welcome to JW Night Talk. So it's nice to see everyone coming online. So I hope it's a nice evening where everyone is in the world. I see someone from Orange County, Justin Florenzio. Hello, Justin. Welcome to the show. For some of you out there, if this is your first time to the show, just to tell you a little bit. Well, first of all, my name is Vern. So a lot of people call me a lot of different things. You know what I mean, Vern? I have a character in my channel I call Vernard. That's kind of the guru. So I do play different characters. If you tune into my channel. You subscribe, you can look at the playlist. There's different programs. So we try to have a little bit of fun, as you notice, on the channel. And especially tonight we have a deeper subject we're going to be talking about. Shunning, disfellowshipping. And Ellie Sambrook, hello. And Mimi, hi, how are you doing? K. Fred, nice to see you. And I am Nancy. Hello. So hello, everyone. Glad to see everyone's online. And we have a good show ahead of us. Now, for those of you online, and for some of you that are listening, perhaps there's some listening and you're not sure if you want to go online. Perhaps you're not even an XJW. It's your first time. Don't be afraid to go online and chat because the community is very, very friendly. Now, if you're online and perhaps you were a Jehovah's Witness or are a Jehovah's Witness and you have been shunned or are being shunned or have been disfellowshipped or are in the process or state of disfellowshipping, if you're in that position, I feel for you. I want you to know that I was also disfellowshipped. And presently, I'm in a state of course, I'm online, so I'm what they call an apostate according to the Jehovah's Witnesses. So that means I'm against the religion. And yes, I am. If you notice in the bottom of the description of all of our videos, we have a petition here in Canada. And we're asking that the Canadian government take a look at religions that shun. Because shunning is such a terrible, terrible thing. And we're going to get into that a little deeper tonight. It's a very good subject for those of you who have been shunned. And this is a trying circumstance if you're in a shunning state. And you're going to learn a lot. I learned so much just going through this information here tonight. So I think our sound is working, or I would have had my good wife check in with me already. So that's a key for tonight. And just so you know, some people think I'm really quick on the keyboards. I get talking here and they think I'm really quick here, but I'm not. My good wife is at the other end and she's on the keyboard. So she's the one that will be chatting with you through the Fixing My Faith. And if you're a Jehovah's Witness and you're in a shun position, if you need help, if you need someone to talk to, reach out online here tonight. And there's a lot of good people out here, and this is a good place, a safe place to talk about it. And the beauty with the chat, the live chats, is that no one knows. We're all over the world, but the one thing we all have in common is that we all care. No one knows who's at the other end, but we all care. And isn't that what it is? And we all understand what it's like. So I want to share with you guys a little bit. I wrote in a book here a while ago. About a year ago, I started writing this book, To Heaven and Back in One Night. The cover is actually different. This is just a not for resale copy I have. And you can get it on Amazon. But I wanted to, there's a part in the book on shunning, page 40. And I wrote about it because I remember what it was like. I was being shunned, disfellowshipped in the congregation. And then I went back. I wanted to I didn't like how it felt to be shunned. You lose the communication with all your friends. I was young at the time, and that was all my friends. We played soccer on the weekends, and when I say young, I'm saying 18, 19, 20 in there. So I got to know these young people when I came into the truth, and I got baptized. I studied for a couple of years and got baptized, and then 6 months later they disfellowshipped me. And it was just like it was like a gut punch, for me. But here's how it felt. I wrote here, my mind goes negative. And in the book, it's kind of a fictional story, real events put into a fictional setting. So in this setting, the main character, Mr. Doe, was praying one night, and Michael the Archangel grabbed him and brought him up to mid-heaven. And then he got up to mid-heaven. He couldn't get into the Golden City because he didn't have a palm branch. And, he was not in a good status with the religion he was in. So he had to take the long way route, and he had to go through the wilderness, just how Jesus went through the wilderness and was tested by the devil. Well, he had to do that. And as he was going through the wilderness, the tests came from within. And here's one of the tests. He was going through the wilderness. It was dark. It was just pitch black, crawling on the sand. And here's what Mr. Doe would happen. He says, my mind goes negative, and I start to think of all those years being in the religion and what it felt like. It was so heavy at times, like walking in darkness. I could not understand many of their ideas, but would go along just because everyone else did. And how many of us were in the religion, and you couldn't really figure that 1914 thing out, and the 7 times 7, and all the Nebuchadnezzar's tree, and all of those things. When I went through baptism, they went through all those questions, and that was back in the 80s. And they said, "Who's the woman?" In Genesis 3 and 15, who's the woman? The first prophecy in the Bible. And I said, well, that's Eve. The woman's Eve. And I thought I was really good getting it right. And the brother says, no, you got that wrong. That's what Christendom believes in. So now I realize that I'm kind of leaning towards Christendom. I was probably right. Anyways, we were taught so many things when we came into the organization. And, sometimes we go along with things just because... so he explained what the woman was. He said the woman's God's heavenly organization, and he used this, how they cherry pick scriptures, and then I said, oh yeah, okay, oh yeah, okay, and you're sure? And he said, yeah, I want to get baptized, I want to be like all the other kids, right? So, anyways, get baptized, you get this fellowship for going along with things. No, my advice to anybody that's going through the questions, don't go along with things. Question. Be very critical about your questions. Anyways, I went along with things, got disfellowshipped. So I wrote about it here, and I said it was like going along with their ideas just because everyone else did. I felt alone a lot of my life, just like I feel in this wilderness, alone. Inside my mind, I hunt and search for a place of peace, but everything is dark with fire burning in the background. My body is now burning from the pain in my muscles, and I'm sure it is purely from dehydration, having not had enough water. I have to take my mind off the negativity, and I need to rest. You know how that is, metaphorically, we're going through life and it gets heavy. If you've ever been disfellowshipped, it gets very heavy. And you just have no energy. You just lay on the couch and watch TV. It's just heavy. And that's just how I felt. So in this situation, they're going through the wilderness, through a desert. So I fall on my stomach onto the sand and then just lay there exhausted, shutting out the world for now. And that's what we do. We shut the world out. We kind of go inwards. My mind seemed to wander in places beyond yonder. The voices within my mind were people I could not find. I stand at the back, but no one will chat. I sit all alone in the rear of the hall. Everyone around is just like a wall. I can feel their stares, but no one will talk. I can feel their judgments as they start to balk. I give out a smile, to the little ones, the child. He peeks in and out from the seat just about. We make it a game because the meeting is lame. His mother scolds him, and I feel the shame. She turns and her glances pierce through me like lances. I follow the schedule to only make amends. I feel it's a challenge to only pretend. I know it's important to be God's friend. I listen to the elders to be a good boy. Why do I do it? I lost all of my joy. So I threw a little poetry into it, as you can see. So I suddenly awaken and my body feels heavy and tired, and the mind feels worn out from just dreaming of how it felt when I was disfellowshipped. I was young, that was almost 40 years ago. I have to get up again and keep going, or I'll never make it out of this place. I get up and I start walking again. I stop and I look up and I say a prayer to God. Are you out there, God? Can you hear me? Please help me out of this darkness. But I can't make a connection. I cannot even think positive enough to stop the negativity in my mind. I sit down on a rock just to see if I can straighten out my mind, but it just wants to play all the negative stuff over and over again. I put my hands to my head and I start to scream and I block out the negative thoughts just for a moment. And I try again to pray to God, but this time I cannot get a prayer out. It seems like the dark cloud is surrounding me and I cannot even pray. Negativity and sadness overcome me, and instantly I start to cry. I just want this to end. Please, someone, can you help me? I cannot stand the voices in my head. All of a sudden, I feel a dark cloud come over me, and the glow in the distance disappears. I can no longer tell where I'm at. The screaming in my head will not stop, and so I roll off the rock onto my knees and I start to crawl and crawl, all the while with screaming inside my mind. It's darkness everywhere, and so I just crawl by instincts, crawling for what seems like days, with these negative voices telling me to end things. My head is exploding, and it's pitch black everywhere. And finally, there's a change in the ground. I come to a hill and I pull myself up using every last ounce of strength. And I get to the top. And all of a sudden, look, wow, I can see light again. That might be at the moment that we roll off the couch and we wake up off a hangover. It could be anything, if we look at that metaphorically. But disfellowshipping is a really, really evil thing. And when we look at all the reasons that they disfellowship us, it's feeble. There's no reasoning to a lot of it. In my case right now, I have to deal with this feeling. My kids won't talk to me, and that's really hard. Let alone all your friends and your old friends, and you have no friends. And you leave the organization, you get out into this world, and you there's no one. You you have to make new friends somehow, or else you just go inward, and a lot of us do. We go inward. I did. Many times. So that's why it's important that if we're going inward and we're not able to talk about it, we should get help. We should instantly get help. And on this channel, if you go in the description below, there's a helpline. It doesn't cost anything. 1-800, and these people understand, and they will get you help. And they'll help you. They'll talk you through it. I'm not a professional. But these channels are good because really what the professionals do is they just talk to you. And they talk about how you're feeling, and everyone on this channel knows what it feels like. So we're going to get into looking at someone else. that knows what it feels like to be disfellowshipped. And I'm just going to pull that up here, displaying camera. And this is someone, if you're in the Watchtower, you would know about this fella. If you've been in the organization for a few years, I started in the 80s. This guy was still alive, I think, Ray Franz. Anybody out there knew of Ray Franz, met Ray Franz? Now, there's Fred Franz, that's his brother. And Fred Franz was, Ray and Fred were on the governing body. They were members of the governing body. So here's a picture of them right here. And if you read about Ray Franz, by the way, this article, and I'm going to be covering more of this fellow's work. He's given me permission to. And he's done some really good work. This fellow's that wrote this, he's from the Watchtower Health Club. That's what he built. That's his site. And he used to work in the New York Bethel in the writing committee, writing. He's a writer, and he's very knowledgeable with the scriptures. So he wrote here about disfellowshipping. We'll cover this on another thumbnail, another video. But I wanted to talk about this little bit here about Ray Franz. And here he is. It says, let's look at the well-known circumstances of one very public disfellowshipping. Ray Franz was a member of the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses. He lived a moral life and studied the Bible daily. He never broke the Bible's moral code. No one in their right mind would have considered him wicked. When he learned that some of the teachings he had been promulgating as a member of the governing body were untrue, he had a crisis of conscience, which led him to resign as his position. So here he is, he's in the governing body, and he says, this stuff doesn't make sense. It doesn't match up to the Bible. I'm going to resign. So he did, he resigned. And and he was just apparently the nicest guy. So at one point, he shared a meal with someone who had been disfellowshipped. And for this, Ray himself was disfellowshipped and consequently shunned by all Jehovah's Witnesses. They considered him a bad guy, wicked. So was Ray making a practice of breaking the Bible's moral code? Was he a wicked man? Answer that question honestly, and you'll see that the official site of Jehovah's Witnesses currently has a big, fat, stinking lie smelling up the place. So that's how this writer put it here in this article. I don't really know his name, the writer of this Watchtower admin, because he told me in an email he wants to stay anonymous. He doesn't want his name to be known. And probably so, because he doesn't want to end up like Ray Franz and disfellowship. There's a lot of good people that have left Bethel, have left the organization. I left, and I wasn't disfellowshipped. But they chased me down 8 years later, and you can look at my story online. My very first video, I talk about it. And they chased me down, and they demonized me, which is the same thing. So then I'll talk about this later. But we're going to talk about it later, because we're going to talk about shunning and what happens when you're shunned. I got angry, and so that's why I started this channel and wrote the book. And that's what happens when you become shunned. That's the damage inside our brains, and we're going to get into that in a second here. Now, going back to Ray, he was a good guy. He lived to the day of his death, as far as I know. And there's a book out there, Crisis of Conscience, you can get, and it's a book about him. Now we're going to go on, and we're going to look at some more information on shunning, the psychology of silent treatment, and so forth. I'm going to go right up to the top here and see what I have for the research here. Shunning. What are the psychological effects of being shunned? Alienation, depression, helplessness, and feelings of unworthiness. Now, if any of us have been online, you want to share that. Maybe it's something you don't want to share, no pressure. What is the trauma of shunning? There's a high prevalence of PTSD among people who have been shunned. So if you've been shunned, or if you are shunned, it's like being in a war or coming out of the war, post-traumatic stress syndrome. And now they're calling it complex, so they put a C in front of it, CPTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome. And we've done some videos on that. You can check my library, and we covered that. And that's what it does to a person. What are the side effects of shunning? This leads to feelings of helplessness, hopelessness, worthlessness, depression, low self-esteem, suicidal ideations, and self-harming behaviors. So that's the damage of shunning. That's what it does. Shunning, is it temporary or is it permanent? It can be both. My shunning is permanent. I'm done. I'm an apostate. I'm online talking negatively about the governing body and things like that. So I'm done. I'm classified as going to the lake of fire that burns with sulfur, where there's the second death, where there's no resurrection. You see the men in New York, they have given all of the elders, the 120,000 congregations worldwide, there's probably 3, 4, 5, 6 elders, times that by 120,000. They have given all those men that qualify to be elders and have an elders book, they have made them judges. And those men can throw you into the second death. Those men. They just have to, all three of them, decide. And those men, all three of them, decide they can make you go to the lake of fire within their religion. This is their mentality. They believe that. And they believe that the governing body has the ability to stand up on the platform and to call all of us online, apostates, call us the worst things ever. And we have videos that cover that. So we know how we're viewed. And then when we go online and we talk about what I'm talking about tonight, for instance, we then are very much shunned by all of the Jehovah's Witnesses all over. Like we are the worst thing. And that's what they say at the assemblies. Now, what I heard recently here is that the organization has knocked off 2 programs about shunning in their upcoming assembly. So it's almost like they're looking at shunning seriously, because in Norway, they lost their religious charity rights. In Norway, they can't marry in the Kingdom Hall. They can't perform marriages. So that's all in the news. We have articles on that, and they're being targeted over shunning. And I think the shunning's going to become class action here pretty soon. I think that's the next thing. And I think that's why they're segregating themselves. And we're going to do some articles on that, and we have, where they're forming little companies, and they're making the Watchtower its own company. The Kingdom Halls are all little companies to protect the Watchtower. And so that's coming out in the news as well. And they're doing that to protect themselves from the legal lawsuits. Now, getting back to this article about shunning, what should you do if you're being shunned and you're feeling like you got nowhere to go? It says, call a friend or go over to their house to talk with them. Now, how do you do that if you're a Jehovah's Witness and you have no friends outside of the religion? How do you do that? You see, that's where it becomes complexed. PTSD. It's like you're in solitary confinement, and you go inward. And this is, we read about what happened in Germany. We talked about what happened in Germany, the shooting at the Kingdom Hall in Germany, and 7 people lost their lives, and that was at a disfellowshipping event at the Kingdom Hall. So now, examples of shunning. He shuns parties and even social events. He divorces his wife, found himself being shunned by many of his friends. These are other types of shunning. We're talking about Jehovah's Witness shunning tonight. And that's the type of shunning we're going to relate all of this to. So that's the end of the basic research. Now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of it here. And can ostracism cause lingering pain in your brain? So this is interesting. So we're going to talk about this article for a bit here. Now this article is put out by Dr. Amen's Clinic, and that's all I know. It's fairly new research. And we have 3 pieces of research. I like to go to a couple of pieces of research when I do this stuff. And I'm finding that they're all saying the same thing. They're all saying that shunning causes pain. So how does it do that? How does shunning cause pain? Like, there's no one hitting us. There's no one even seeing us. We're in our house. How can that give us pain? Excuse me for a second. Turn my mic off for that one. Okay, back to the article. It's often been noted that rejection is among the most painful of human emotions. Rejection. So that's why, one of the best disciplines, we think of disciplining children. We don't have to beat our children with rods. Just send them to their room for 5 minutes, and it's just the worst thing that could happen to our child, and no one gets hurt. It's just discipline. So in the right place, this can be used properly. It's certainly better than beating a child with a rod, right? And that's another one of the problems that Jehovah's Witnesses, by the way, are being targeted for in Japan right now. Beating their kids with a rod. Just follow. The Bible says that in the Bible, beat your kids with a rod. But that's the Old Testament. You go to the Old Testament, and Jehovah's Witnesses love that. They love cherry picking all over the place, and they love using the Old Testament all the time. But yet Jesus says, love, 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 and he pulls the children. Here's what Jesus did. He grabs the children, puts them on his lap, and he scolds the apostles. He kind of scolds them, and he says, be like these children. Be like children. And then you remember the apostles were arguing with one another who was greater. And Jesus took the children in a loving way and used them as an example. But then you go to the Old Testament, it seemed like the children always got in the way and beat them with a rod, and Jehovah's Witnesses like that one, I guess. But this is where cognitive dissonance happens too. We're in this religion, and they cherry pick all over the place. All Scripture is supposed to be inspired, but then we get to Jesus. He does this, and then we go over here, and the old law, the old Torah for the Israelite Jews, that's what it was for. Said this, and Jehovah's Witnesses present it like this, saying, you got to discipline your kids. You got to use the rod. If you don't use the rod, they will, and then every Kingdom Hall, all you can hear at the back is bang, 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 bang on the kid's diaper in the mother's room. It's just like a big echo. And then you think, oh, good thing they're disciplining their children, because their children's not crying. They're righteous. They're nailing that child. And this is what's happening, and I probably will get a copyright strike on this one. Just for even talking about this on YouTube, we get copyright strikes. So what happens when we do that? We just don't get any advertising on it, basically. But these are important subjects. We talk about them. We have to talk about them. And if we don't talk about them, then the governments think everything's okay in these religions. We came out of these religions. We have a voice. We got to talk about it, and we got to share our stories with the world, and talk about and then do something about it. And that's what we're doing. So we know it's painful. Anyone who has felt the sting of rejection, ostracism, or shunning knows how deeply these experiences sting. According to the Purdue University expert, ostracism can cause pain that often is deeper and lasts longer than a physical injury. I thought that was interesting. Being excluded or ostracized is, where am I here? Okay, we're right here. Yeah, being excluded or ostracized is an invisible form of bullying that doesn't leave bruises, and therefore we often underestimate its impact. So I never thought of it that way, like bullying that doesn't leave. And it is. That's what's happening, is the congregation, the elders are bullying you or me into this shunning position to get us, to bully us back into the congregation. We might have asked a question, like Ray Franz asked a few questions, and he got bullied, and they just looked for an opportunity to shun him. And this is what happens over and over again. Now, when a person is ostracized, the brain's dorsal anterior, I'm going to say this wrong, cingulate cortex, that's why I have the words up on the screen here, which registers physical pain, also feels this social injury. So the part of our brain that feels the physical pain also registers this emotional pain from shunning. And it says there's the process of ostracism includes 3 stages. The initial act of being ignored or excluded, that's number 1. Number 2 is coping, and number 3 is resignation. So we're going to look at all 3 stages. But I'm going to wet my tongue first. Now back to the article. Fundamental and foundational for our human needs are the feelings of belonging. Exclusion or ostracism is so painful because it threatens this need and the core of our self-esteem. Again and again, research has found that strong, harmful reactions are possible even when ostracized by a stranger for a short amount of time. More than 5,000 people have participated in studies using a computer game designed by Williams to show how just 2 or 3 minutes of ostracism can produce lingering negative feelings. Now, just 2 or 3 minutes. Even when being ignored briefly by strangers with whom the individual will never have any face-to-face interactions, the negative effect is powerful and consistent. This was true even with a great variety of personalities. People also vary in how they cope during the second stage of ostracism. Coping can mean that the person tries harder to be included. For example, and this is where if a person's going back to the Kingdom Hall. So first of all, you get disfellowshipped, you get announced at the Kingdom Hall. I don't know if they do that today. And maybe if any of you guys are online that are still in the organization and you know the rules now, let us know, because they always change the rules. But when I was in, they would announce your name and they would say this person is, they wouldn't use the word disfellowship, but no longer affiliated with Jehovah's Witnesses or no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses, something like that. I think they used to use the word disfellowshipped, but maybe let us know if anybody has the answer online. Thank you. So let's carry on. People also vary how they cope during the second stage. So the second stage means the person tries harder to be included. So they go back to the Kingdom Hall. And for example, they may try to engage in behaviors that might foster acceptance. So mimicking, complying, obeying orders, cooperating, or expressing attraction. So if what happens is you're disfellowshipped and you figure you're obeying all the rules. So what they tell you is, they told me when I was disfellowshipped, I couldn't stand and I couldn't sing. I had to sit down. That was in the day I was disfellowshipped. And they do change the rules. I know they do. Because there was another person that was disfellowshipped with me, and that person was an unbaptized publisher. And they were disfellowshipped and treated the same. This was in the early 80s. So the rules have changed, I know that. But now, the whole thing is the same. Going back, you have to sit at the back of the hall, come in, they told us that we had to come in before the song, before the prayer, and that they would be marking points or whatever they did, that we would sit there. But they wanted us to sit down and not stand up and not sing. So we weren't allowed to. So we had to feel humiliated. They said, so I asked, well, why don't I just come in after all of that and just come in and sit down at the end, when you guys are talking, and then leave before the song and all that kind of stuff. And they, no. If you do that, it's going to take you longer if we'll reinstate you. We want you need the whole prayer, you need the whole meeting, but you can't partake. You can't sing with the congregation. You have to sit there. But you need the prayer, and you need to sit through the ending, and it's good for to humble you, is what they said. So that's, you see, so then what happens here, and it talks about this right here in this article. It says, what we'll do is we will try to engage in behaviors that might foster acceptance. So mimicking or complying or obeying orders. And, I even heard stories, because then you have to do this for a certain amount of time. There's like 6 months, every meeting. In them days, there was 3 meetings a week, and you couldn't go to someone's home. In them days, we had book study in homes. And so you weren't allowed to go into the person's home because you were disfellowshipped. So there was Kingdom Hall meetings always. There was always a meeting at the Kingdom Hall, on weekend or whatever. So you'd show up at the Kingdom Hall meeting. And the Kingdom Hall was considered a public place. But disfellowshipped people were not allowed in other people's homes. It was against the rules. So you had to comply with these orders, you had to obey these orders, and you had to cooperate, and you had to express attraction, you had to kind of express this, and so then after a while, you do this for 3 or 4 months. You'd write a letter. It's a long time, 3 or 4 months of this. You write a letter. You're all alone at home. You write a letter to the body of elders. And then they wait, and they don't even get back to you, or they let you know in a while, days seem like weeks, and they let you know like a week later, the next week. Let's say you handed that letter in, and you usually put the letter in the contribution box, because they would tell you that, or how every congregation was different. But we put it, I think, in a box or something. Then they get back to you a week later and say, yeah, we got your letter, and we'll get back to you. We have to arrange a meeting, and so-and-so's busy, and so-and-so's out of town, and we got this circuit assembly coming up, so the body of elders would get together after the circuit assembly. So then weeks turns into months, and then finally they phone you up and meet with you, and it might be 6 months. And they say, yeah, they hum and haw, and they ask very personal questions. I found 3 letters. It takes 3 letters. So if you're disfellowshipped, get your first letter in really quick. Get the second letter in really quick. Don't type them. I typed some letters. They don't even look at them. Handwrite your letters. Get your letters in. Quicker the better. 3 letters. It seems like you're desperate. But it always takes 3 letters, and then they give you all kinds of time. And anyways, the best is to, if you're disfellowshipped, the best is to, in my opinion, I don't know, you got to decide. Everyone's situation is different, but the best is just to get out of it and start starting a new life. That's what I think. So the sooner you can get out, the better it is. So, but here's how it is. I got reinstated. I complied, obeyed the orders, got reinstated finally, and I stayed in it for 30 years. And then, kids and family members get disfellowshipped, and it never ends. You're always reaching out to get back in because you break some rule, or your kid does, or something. And it says here, complying, obeying orders, so on and so forth. If this tactic doesn't work and hope for inclusion is lost, people stop worrying about being liked and decided they just want to be noticed. In this stage, they may resort to provocative behavior or even aggression. So sometimes, and we've seen this, and I don't want to talk about what happened in Germany, but we all know what happened there. And there's some aggression on a disfellowshipping situation, and it's all over the world. These things are happening. Violence. People are resorting to standing up at a Kingdom Hall and making an outburst, and then never going back, perhaps. I don't know. It says, however, if a person has been ostracized for a long time, people can't continue to cope with the pain and often eventually give up. This is the 3rd stage, and this is called resignation. The 3rd stage is called resignation, and some people who have been ostracized, they become less helpful and more aggressive to others in general. And they also may feel an increase in anger and sadness. Long-term ostracism can result in alienation, depression, helplessness, and feelings of unworthiness. And sometimes extreme groups, talking about gangs and the like, can provide members with a sense of belonging, self-worth, and control, but they can also fuel narrowness, radicalism, and intolerance, and perhaps a propensity toward hostility and violence toward others. And when a person feels ostracized, they feel out of control, and aggressive behavior is one way to restore that control. So if we look onto the XJW channel and we look at a lot of the videos, we might sometimes notice that people seem like they have aggressive behavior, angry behavior. On my channel, you will have noticed at times I feel agitated, and you'll see it in my face and my tone of my voice. So that happens. If that's happening, this is why. This is number 3, stage number 3. So we're going to carry on. Here are some tips if you have experienced ostracism. Seek a safe and supportive therapist, counselor, or wise friend who can help you traverse the pain. So seek a safe, supportive therapist, a counselor, or wise friend who can help you. And you notice it says seek it because not all counselors are going to be the same. You might go to one and say, I don't like that person. Then you go to another one. Like I said before, on this channel, these XJW channels, and I've seen them all over the XJW different channels. You get onto Rick Fearon's lives, and people are there to help people. You see it all the time. So it says seek out healthy individuals who are accepting, healthy, and supportive. We also need to be aware and teach our kids that ostracism hurts people as deeply, if not more so, than a physical wound. So this is serious. Today there's laws against hitting someone physically. So what we're pushing for in Canada is that these laws be applied to ostracism, to disfellowshipping, to shunning, and that these groups like Jehovah's Witnesses, like the JW.org, because it's not Jehovah's Witnesses, the people, it's not them. It's JW.org, it's the governing body that implements this. And then they have all these elders obeying. They're like robots, they obey the governing body. And a lot of people are getting hurt. So it says sometimes ostracism happens unintentionally and for no reason. And in this case, it says, when you are feeling composed and confident, it's important to stand up for yourself and remind the other person that you are also important. Being lighthearted and finding humor in these situations may pay off. So that's important. We see more of this happening on the XJW channels, more humor, more satires. And I think this is important to sit back and just laugh about it. This weekend we had I seen a good friend I haven't seen for a year, XJW, and for the first time we sat back and we laughed about things. And then he says to me, a year ago, Vern, he says, you were a different person. So I know that this work that we're doing on this channel does pay off. It does pay off to do the research, to undo some of the programming that we have been programmed with. And then when it comes to ostracism, we got to make sure that we're not carrying out narcissistic practices ourselves. And we do have a video on narcissism, and you can check it out on my channel. So it says here at Amen's Clinic, we have compassionate therapists who may be able to help you find peace, self-esteem, and acceptance after a painful ostracizing, shunning, or other experiences of being excluded. We may also be able to suggest exercises, supplements, and if needed, medication to help. No doubt such experiences hurt, but remember, there's also always help. Call us today at 855-508-1316 to get started or tell us more. So I left this in the description, this link. You can go to it, and we're going to carry on to the next article. The next article here, is talking about what happens in your mind and brain when you are excluded from a social activity. So what happens inside your mind and inside your brain? This is kind of a long article. It's I might paraphrase a bit of it because some of the words are complicated too. So bear with me and we'll go through it. It's designed for children. And by the way, this article, the reason I want to cover it, it's coming out of Japan. And if you don't know it, Japan is making, they are, I don't want to use the word going after, but Jehovah's Witnesses are in the limelight in Japan for shunning and for the way they're disciplining the children and blood transfusions as well. So this article is from Japan. There's a lot of research going into shunning and the damages of shunning. So here's the abstract. In school and in everyday life, we sometimes experience rejection by classmates, or we might see someone being excluded from an activity. So what about two children, let's say teenagers at school? And our children are just learning to adapt and to grow, and we want to give them all the support, all the positive support we can. So you get two teenagers at school, and one was a Jehovah's Witness and now is disfellowshipped. And you get the other teenager at school that's a Jehovah's Witness. Now that teenager at school, in gym class, in math class, in English class, in science class, at the beginning of the year, they were buddies. They were always together, and then all of a sudden, they're enemies. They have to shun. But the person being shunned doesn't want to be shunned. It's the other person that's being forced to shun. So you see, they're forcing the kids to shun each other at school. And this is why this is becoming a problem. And it's getting addressed by the governments. So what do excluded individuals feel? How does the brain process information about being socially excluded? In the past few decades, psychologists and social neuroscientists have investigated the influence of social exclusion on our mind, brain, and behavior. Social exclusion is a complex and ambiguous phenomenon, and therefore we process information about it dynamically and often cope with it flexibly. In this article, I've described the dynamic effects of social exclusion on our mind, brain, and the behavior by developing a model of what happens in the brain and the actions people take upon experiencing social exclusion. So what is it? Well, we talked quite a bit about social exclusion, so we know what it is as ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. It says, before beginning to explain how social exclusion dynamically affects our mind, brain, and behavior, the author of this article says, I would like to briefly introduce the mystery of social pain, defined as painful feeling caused by social exclusion. So the pain of social exclusion. We often use the term painful to describe the feeling we have when we are being excluded. The question is, why do we use this word to describe what we feel, even though we do not have actual physical injury or pain? Using the concepts pain or painful to describe the feeling of being excluded or rejected by others is common across languages. This author says, I live in Japan, which is probably very far from where you are and we live, or where you are and you live. In Japan, I use the word pain to describe my feelings when I end a relationship with a lover or a friend, or when my parents exclude me. It is quite possible that you also use a similar word to describe your feelings under similar circumstances. Prior social neuroscience studies have shown that similar areas of the brain are activated when we experience physical and social pain. Scientists have often used the Cyper ball task to study social pain in the laboratory. Number 1. In this task, the participants play an online ball tossing game with 2 or 3 other players, in which the other players might exclude the participant by throwing fewer tosses at him or her. In one study, participants played this game while inside a brain scanner called a functional magnetic resonance imaging scanner. You might know it, and I know it as an MRI. The MRI can identify brain regions that become active when an activity is being performed. When the participants experience social pain during the game, an area of the brain called the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex became active. So remember we talked about it in the last article. It's the same part of the brain that activates when we get hurt or someone hits us, when we feel excluded. So here they're just using a game, and this person gets tossed a ball less than the other person. So let's say if a teacher has a favorite in gym class, well, the other kids are going to feel the pain of being excluded. So this is why these studies are important for everyone, for teachers at school. And when we think of the congregation, the elder body is supposed to be the teachers, the examples, and the leaders. And the governing body is supposed to be the direct connection to God. So, but we're not taught this at the Kingdom Hall, of course. We're put in positions of pain for control. So now we're going to carry on. They talk about this this little experiment, this pain, this social experiment, and this is how they're doing it. So the dynamic process in social exclusion. We dynamically interpret and process information about social exclusion because of ambiguity and complexity of social exclusion. Just imagine the cyberball game that we're just talking about. You have been looking forward to playing the game, but when it starts, the other two players do not throw balls at you. You wait and wait, hoping that the situation will change, but the game ends without you getting any balls. How would you feel during the game, and how would your brain respond to the situation over time? We have previously proposed an interpersonal process of model of social exclusion that describes what happens to our minds, brains, and behaviors during and after social exclusion. See Figure 2. When we are excluded, we detect, appraise, and regulate the adverse impact of social exclusion. Detection and appraisal are associated with an alarm system, which signals that there's a problem requiring our attention. Both detection and appraisal have been explained by using the analogy of a smoke alarm. An alarm works by detecting smoke, detecting that something is wrong or abnormal, and by ringing, sending out a warning or to bring attention to the problem when the fire occurs. These functions of the alarm help us to notice that a fire has occurred and there is a need to take action. The warning sound is discontinued when there is no abnormal smoke. So now taking that illustration, during the social exclusion, we need to detect the event that threatens a relationship, detecting that something is wrong or abnormal, and appraise how painful it is. Pain is a warning sound. So you see, we have this smoke alarm or this alarm inside of us. And if we're feeling pain from this exclusion or being disfellowshipped, then this warning sound goes off in us. Both systems are associated with the DACC, the DAC, the evoke social pain. That's that place in our brain that registers pain. It's the same place that registers physical pain. There's another area of the brain called the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex. They call it the VLPFC. And that is known to reduce social pain. So the frontal cortex helps regulate the sounds of the alarm so that it does not become too loud. So the loudness of the alarm, the amount of social pain changes with time during social exclusion, based on the degree of the threat associated with the exclusion. Thus it seems that we continuously detect, appraise, and regulate social pain during social exclusion. So I don't know if you got all of that, but what it's saying is that when we're disfellowshipped for the amount of time, so there's a certain amount of social pain when you're initially disfellowshipped. So you go to the elders meeting and you're hoping that, because what happens if there's a wrongdoing or the elders figure that you did something wrong? Two of them come and see you. So they call it an investigative committee. So they come and investigate, and they get nosy. And if you don't give them the information they want, they'll bring you before 3 people. So now if you go before 3 people, that's like going into a psychiatric clinic, at least before. If you go to a psychiatric hospital, if you're determined in front of 3 doctors that you're crazy, you're going to stay there. You can't get out. So the first thing is don't ever go there. Don't get in there. Don't go to an elders meeting, because there's 3 of them, and if those 3 guys, and there's usually one louder one, and he usually leads the 3, usually. But those 3 elders, if they agree that you're crazy or you need to be disfellowshipped, they're going to disfellowship you, and it'll affect you your whole life. So the best is not to go to those elders meetings, even if they ask you to. Now, if you do get disfellowshipped, or you do go to the elders meeting, your warning bell, your smoke alarm's going off like crazy. You get in there and you're praying and praying that maybe you won't get disfellowshipped, but then you get disfellowshipped and you fall apart. And I've seen people just break apart. And then you settle down, and then to get back, then the elders tell you, well, it would show humility if you showed up when they announced your name. When they announced your name, if you're there, that shows humility, and you might get this reinstated quicker, because that shows that you turned around or repented. They play games with you. It's a big power trip, and it's sad. When I think back, I was just a young person, and they really played power games with my mind, and it affected me my whole life. And I think this is all going to come back on the Watchtower. I think as stuff comes out and we talk about it more and there's more research, there's accountability here for a lot of the damage that they've done by disfellowshipping people for no reason. So anyways, what happens is you get disfellowshipped, the fire alarm goes off, the alarms go off, you go home. Now it festers, it's really loud until you get to your first meeting. And if you don't get back to the first meeting, it's really loud. The sooner you can get back on the horse, I guess, the better it is. You get to the first meeting and it's loud. But after a few meetings, after a few weeks, you get into a routine of being disfellowshipped. It's like being put into solitary confinement in a prison. Except they even let you out and associate with the other prisoners once a day. They're not that mean to you. So when you're disfellowshipped from a Jehovah's Witness kingdom hall, that's it. No association. You're in solitary confinement. Could be for the rest of your life if you don't play their games. So now to carry on with this, it gives a little bit of a chart. Detection, where it was using that, giving us the analogy of a fire alarm. And that's detected inside our brain, the same place we detect pain. Then we do an appraisal, then we regulate it, and then we do social monitoring. Now we're going to talk about this a little bit here, the process. So it says another method of investigating how the brain reacts to social exclusion is by using the event-related brain potential, ERP, which is family of brain waves. So they're getting into studying the brain waves and so on and so forth. This is quite detailed, and the link is in here for those of you that are interested in some of the medical terms. So here it says, what should you do if you hear the alarm bells ringing without stopping? So if you're still upset the same amount you were upset the day you were disfellowshipped and it's not stopping, how do you cope with this social exclusion? It's known to be a situation dependent. Excluded individuals enhance their social monitoring system, SMS, to determine how to behave. More specifically, excluded people become highly attentive to how other people might be feeling and thinking. So now we become worried about how that person's thinking, how that elder's looking at us. And then we go to the meeting, we're disfellowshipped, right? And we're sitting there, now we're really ultra sensitive, and we're noticing everything. We're noticing that elder looked at us and maybe looked at us wrong, and they don't like me. And it's nothing like that. Our brain just starts playing tricks on us. And this is what happens. This is why it's dangerous. This exclusion that the Watchtower does. It's dangerous. More specifically, excluded people become highly attentive to how other people might be feeling and thinking. The brain regions that are associated with understanding thoughts and beliefs of others, they call it the dorsomedical prefrontal cortex and temporal parietal junction. I know I didn't say that right, but it's there. And the cognitive process related to attention and the facial recognition. So it's talking about how the brain associates the thoughts and the beliefs of our cortex, the front part of our brain that tries to make everything okay. And it's even going to use facial recognition, so we have built-in facial recognition. We look at people, and if they give us a scowl, or if they look at us, you're disfellowshipped, you're the slum of the earth kind of a thing, or they don't want to look at us, we notice all of these things, and that's when our facial recognition part of our brain kicks in. We start analyzing people and how they look at us in a negative way. Excluded people decide how they should behave based on SMS. If there are cues of social acceptance, such as opportunities to build new relationships in the smiling faces of others, excluded people behave pro-socially, which means behaviors performed with the intention of helping others and being included by others. Pro-social behavior helps to reduce social pain by helping the person to feel connected. On the other hand, excluded people might also behave aggressively if there are cues indicating social threats. Example, excluders and peers of the excluders. Behaving aggressively helps to protect them from further social exclusion. So this is where, excuse me, this is where it can get dicey if you're picketing, going to in front of a Kingdom Hall and picketing, or in front of Assembly Hall and picketing, holding up your picketing. Because you're being excluded, and there can be anger that comes up within these situations. So, and the JWs in good standing are known to actually throw some bad remarks at you. Even the JWs in Bethel, they say they use a lot of vulgar language and stuff like that. But anyways, it's getting back to this article, we have to be careful that we don't provoke our situation. If we haven't healed and we're angry, if we're just getting out there and we're angry, because we don't want to get into a situation where we get thrown in jail. That's not going to be good for us either. Okay, so let's carry on here. Social exclusion as a stored experiences. So far, I have described how a single instance of social exclusion affects our mind, brain, and behavior. How would these processes change? I'm going to have to just clear my throat here, sorry. There, I shut the mic off, so you didn't have to hear that. Now, people with attachment avoidance have often experienced chronic social exclusion by caregivers who have not helped them to feel comfortable and accepted. So these are just some other examples of social exclusion. It's all over. Social exclusion. I think we're just going to go to the conclusion here. Yeah, we're already at 6 o'clock. In this article, this person described how social exclusion affects our mind, brain, and behaviors. And so if you're disfellowshipped, it's good to read up on this if you ever have been disfellowshipped. If you're now experiencing shunning or any of this, the more we can read up and understand this, the more it can help us. Now I want to switch over to the other article, the last article here. And it's taken from the Atlantic. It's more of a just an article on, what do they call it here? what you're saying when you give someone the silent treatment. So have you ever given someone the silent treatment? I know I have. I've given people the silent treatment in different situations. I had to go out and get a restraining order on an individual at one time in my life. And so I asked the court to respect the silent treatment that I wanted, because this person was a narcissist, and they were coming at me every day, and they were just destroying my reputation. So I had to actually go to the police and get some help. And so therefore, and this is a family member, and that's what's hard about it, is when it's a family member. So anyways, what are you saying when you give someone the silent treatment? So social ostracism has been a common punishment for millennia, but freezing someone out harms both the victim and the perpetrator. So that was the opening statement on this article. This individual has studied the effects of the silent treatment for more than 36 years, and meeting hundreds of victims and perpetrators in the process. So a grown woman whose father refuses to speak with her for 6 months at a time as punishment throughout her life. Her father died during one of those dreaded periods, the author says. So when she visited him at the hospital shortly before the death, he turned away from her and wouldn't break his silence. He wouldn't even say goodbye. Could you imagine? A father who stopped talking to his teenage son. And I read an article about that, by the way, on blood. So the father woke up through the process. It was right here in Edmonton, regarding blood transfusions, and the family didn't want blood transfusions. The daughter was dying in the hospital. So the father goes in, he was waking up, he gave her all the scriptural reasons why she didn't have to listen to the watchtower, and she turned her head like this. I'm not listening to you, Father. And this is how he was shunned. And you could just imagine. When he was telling his story, and we showed it on one of our earlier programs, he was crying when he told his story, and you could imagine. So, a father who stopped talking to his teenage son and couldn't start again. So that happens when disfellowshipping happens. So the teenage son rebels and gets disfellowshipped. The father quits talking to him. And despite the harm he knew he was causing, so the father listens to the governing body, quits talking to his son, despite the harm he knows he is causing his son. And that's cognitive dissonance. It's all kinds of narcissistic, wrong ways of dealing with family. And this is how, within the Jehovah's Witness organization, this is how they're all trained to deal with family when it comes to shunning. So it's sad, and so many families are split up. Why? Well, here's what this person says. The isolation made my son change from a happy, vibrant boy to a spineless jellyfish. And the father says, I knew I was the cause. So, but that's what the isolation does. It makes people a spineless jellyfish, and they go back to the kingdom hall. That's what the shunning does. It just destroys people. A wife whose husband severed communications with her early in their marriage. She endured 4 decades of silence and started with a minor disagreement and only ended with her husband dead. 40 years of eating meals by herself, watching television by herself, 40 years of being invisible. When I ask her why she stayed with him for all the time, William said, she answers simply, because at least he kept a roof over my head. So what a pathetic reason, right? A teacher, a sibling, a grandparent, a friend. Each story that this University Williams pulls out is just heartbreaking. When it comes to shunning. The silent treatment goes by many names: shunning, social isolation, stonewalling, ghosting. Although psychologists have nuanced definitions for each term, they are all essentially forms of ostracism. And the tactic is nothing new. Ancient Greeks expelled for 10 years citizens who were thought to be a threat to democracy. And early American settlers banished people accused of practicing witchcraft. Religions have frozen out individuals for centuries, Jehovah's Witnesses. Catholics call it excommunication. Hiram is the highest form of punishment in Judaism, and the Amish practice midung. The Church of Scientology recommends total disconnection from anyone deemed agnostic toward the religion. So as you see, it's not just Jehovah's Witnesses that practice shunning. So ostracism can also manifest in lesser ways. Someone walking out of the room in the middle of a conversation, a friend at school looking the other way when you wave at them, or a person addressing comments from everyone in the message thread except you. And even online, when we look online here, and you're putting in, and if you go at Fixing My Faith, you'll notice my good wife is always there. She's always there giving you a comment, because there's nothing more frustrating than you want to talk to the speaker and you can't get a word in. So that's what we try to do on these lives, is we try to design them so that you can get our attention, and she'll come over and talk to me, and I'll talk about, let's say you have a really good point, then we'll go back and read your point so you can be heard. But I know on other lives, sometimes perhaps the person doing the live doesn't have a good wife at the other end like I do, and they have to try to do it themselves. It's really hard for the person doing the live, so don't blame them. They're doing their best. I'm gonna stick up for them a little bit here. Okay, now because we humans require social contact for our mental health, the ramification of isolation can be severe. So we probably missed a bit, but it talked about earlier that we are social creatures. The human being is a social creature. It needs companions, it needs people, the human being. So that's good to realize. I didn't realize that as much, but we are community people. To isolate ones from the community, there's ramifications. It causes a lot of pain. It causes long-term problems. It says, although a perpetrator might use the silent treatment in many different scenarios, this is what every scenario has in common. People use the silent treatment because they can get away with it without looking abusive to others. And I think that's kind of, maybe the Jehovah's Witnesses, they don't want to look abusive, so they just disfellowship them. Get them out, and really when people need the help the most is when they're having problems. That's not the time to throw them in solitary confinement and lock them up. It's a time that they need association. And by the way, excommunication, I looked into it in the Catholic Church. There's nothing to do with shunning. It sounds worse than it is. All it is those little crackers they take at communion. You can't do that. You can't do the communion. You lose some privileges in the church. But you sit with your family, you eat with your family, you go play soccer with your friends. In fact, they encourage you to come to church more and associate with the congregation, and then you can eventually get your privileges back in the Catholic Church. So they're doing the opposite. They're encouraging you to associate, but you lost you're excommunicated because you can't go up and at Mass and take their communion. So it is different. It's not like the Jehovah's Witness religion. The silent treatment might be employed by passive personality types to avoid conflict and confrontation, while strong personality types use it to punish or control. Some people may not even consciously choose it at all. A person may be flooded with feelings they can't put into words, so they just shut down. And I thought this was important because we could feel like we're being shunned by someone, but maybe they just don't want to be around us because maybe we're always angry, or maybe we pummel them with questions, or maybe it brings up old memories. Maybe, in the XJW community, there's lots of reasons. It could be even our own kids don't want to come out and see us that much because of all this XJW confusion, anger, and so forth. So there's a lot of different, I guess we'll have to use the word damage. There's a lot of damage resulting from shunning. It just destroys the family in so many different ways. And we see that over and over again, and I've experienced that in my family. Now, one study found that social rejection provoked a response in its victims similar to that of victims of physical abuse. The anterior cingulate cortex area of the brain, the area thought to interpret emotion and pain, was active in both instances, and we covered that. So, and you see how they're covering this in every article? They're equating physical pain is the same as social, this disfellowshipping, this social pain, exclusion. The silent treatment ultimately harms a person, causing it too. Humans are predisposed to reciprocate social cues, so ignoring someone goes against our nature. For both parties. So even the congregation, when the elders tell the congregation to ignore this person, it's hard on the congregation because a lot of people in the congregation, perhaps are good friends, love that person, perhaps their family, so it's hard on them also. So this shunning, this whole practice of shunning that has been adopted by the Jehovah's Witnesses, and they made it a part of their indoctrination, has to go away. It's not right. It's damaging, and it's not what Jesus instituted. Jesus instituted love, and the greatest command is love. Love your Father, love those around us. He even went in to talk about, in John, you go to the very last chapter of John, oh yeah, you can't find that anymore in the Jehovah's Witness Bible because they pulled it out. But you can go back to their 1984 edition and find this. It's in there. And in the very last chapter of John, John 8, it talks about this prostitute. And the Jews were there, and they all had stones, and they all wanted to stone the prostitute. And Jesus says, well, who of you who have not sinned, cast a first stone? And so the Jews, the Pharisees, the scribes, those religious leaders, they walked away first because they know what the law says. We're all sinners. And Jesus nailed it. So who of you who have not sinned, cast the first stone? So who of you in the elder body who have not sinned, cast the first stone? Yeah. You have to walk away. That's the example that Jesus gave. So everyone walked away. The prostitute did not get stoned. According to the Jewish law, she was supposed to, but we're under the Christian law. And Jesus did this while they were under the Jewish law. They were there to stone her and follow the law and be heroes. But Jesus intervened and set everyone straight. And they couldn't answer. All the people walked away. So he says to the prostitute, he says, go your way and just quit doing what you're doing. What a loving thing. You see, he was there to help her when she needed some help. Maybe she just needed that second chance, or that's all she knew how to do. But now, and it explains, she went in to follow him. And the Bible does talk about these women that followed Jesus, and one of them perhaps was a prostitute. We don't have all the clues. We'd have to dig up the old book of Mary that was turfed way back then and read that. But Jesus did look at the women in a favorable way. And that's a whole nother discussion. But when we look at the congregation and we look at how they disfellowship, it's not Christ-like. And we see so many differences. Now, the Apostle Paul talked about it a lot, but yet here's a guy, and a lot of us have questions on the Apostle Paul. He's never been married, never had kids, never had a girlfriend that I know of in the Bible, didn't speak too highly about the women, loved disfellowshipping. Paul loved disfellowshipping. He loved authority. And it would appear that he made a religion for the Romans because they loved authority as well. But there's a large amount of us outside of religion that are spiritual, and we don't mind the Bible. You can use the whole Bible, but there's a large percentage of us that tend to keep it simple, and we follow the two commands of love, and we find that's all we need. You don't need anything written. You don't need watchtowers, bound volumes, or anything. It's really quite simple. So that's how we're going to end up the program here today, is on that note, on love. And we'll take a look at the comments here.
Yeah. Thank you to Faded Glory for the donation.
Yes, thanks to Faded Glory for the donations. That was great. We do appreciate that. Or, Talkum Woman, thank you for being online. You're great. Thanks for helping us. Jane Spitfire, thanks for being there. Gilbert, GG4GB, we really enjoyed your program the other night. That was a lot of energy, really good. I'm hoping you guys keep that up, because there was a lot of people online too, so I think that was great. And who else do we have here? Blue Rose, thank you for being online with us. And you guys are a great audience. I hope the material was okay for you. And if you're disfellowshipped, if you're feeling lonely or depressed, these chat lines are great. And there's a professional, if you 800 lines, go to the description again below. In the description of this video, you'll find some helplines. And they're available, and there's people out there that can help. So, with that, we're going to go back to get rid of the screen here. And we're back at the studio here. So if you have topics that you'd like us to cover on some of these lives, please send us an email, even put comments in. We read the comments. And they do help us to, as we present these parts. Now, coming up, I will be doing some videos, not lives, but videos. Again, going back to that Watchtower helpline, there's a lot of subjects there. And I think we got his permission. The fella did a lot of work there, really good work. And so we're going to start doing videos on all this stuff and getting it out there. The more we can get out there, the more we can help people coming out of the religion to deal with some of the cognitive dissonance that they're dealing with. So until next time, we want to just keep a smile on and visit with people. We're social creatures, so find some other social clubs. I know there's like 4-H clubs here in Canada, where for the farming communities. Even in town, there's little clubs you can join to socialize and get to know things. And it's not healthy to stay within and just try to go to those meetings and stay within, keep everything inward. That's not healthy. So it's good to, if you're outside of the Watchtower, if you're disfellowshipped, it's good to get involved in something else, get to know people. So with those thoughts in mind, we are going to, where are we here? We're going to go back to single screen, and we are going to close with our conclusion. So until next time, keep living your life with love. Bye for now. Well, thank you for joining us tonight on the live and talking about some of these deeper subjects. But as ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, we get out of the organization and we have to deal with shunning, disfellowshipping, and many of these hard, painful experiences. But now, just to end the show in a positive note, join me as we go for a walk and pretend that you can float. And sometimes if we can use our imagination, perhaps we're all alone, we have no one to talk to. Use your imagination and imagine you have superpowers. So join me as we conclude the program, and I want you to know that we love you. So until next time, keep living your life with love, and you'll attract that back to you. Thanks again. Bye for now.